Hello and welcome back to the Phil Rosenberg Show. I am your host, Phil Rosenberg, and I am here with Andy Zhang. He's a mathematician and he's an engineer working in the healthcare space. And what he's done prior to that is going to blow your mind. Andy has been involved with some social media work. We're going to talk to him about algorithms and about how algorithms affect what you see in your newsfeed on social media. So, Andy, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Let me first ask you, what is a neural network? What is an AI neural
A
network?
neural network is a computer simulation of a human brain. Before, maybe about 10 years ago, AI tended to refer to more algorithms, whereas now you're simulating neurons and synapses and simulating the connections of the brain.
Okay, so we could spend a really long time talking about AI, but I want to ask you about how it affects what we see and read and hear on social media and about algorithms too.
Like 10 years ago, if you wanted to build an AI to play Tetris, you would hire some smart engineers, you'd have them basically figure out how Tetris works, and then they would play Tetris, right? They would basically have to understand all the ins and outs of how the game works, and they come up with some algorithms in order to play the game. Now, how you do it is you just create a neural network. And what you do is you basically connect it to the game of Tetris, and you have it start playing Tetris. Now, obviously, this randomly generated brain is going to be pretty bad, but we put it through this process of evolutionary learning, where we create not just one of these brains, but we'll create maybe a million of these brains. We'll have these million completely randomly generated brains play Tetris. And then what we'll do is we'll grade them on something. For Tetris, it may be the high score, right? And then we'll take the top like 1% of the brains and then kill off the rest of them. And this top 1%, what we do is we'll do slight mutations to how the connections are made between, and then kill off 99% again. And we do this again and again and again. So basically, through this evolutionary learning process, you end up with something that can play Tetris really well. But the key distinction between the modern neural network and the old system is that I just need to connect it to Tetris. I don't have to actually understand how Tetris works. I don't actually have to do anything. I basically just click and let it go, and it kind of just works.
How does social media use AI? What do we see when we look at our social media platforms that's negotiated by AI systems?
Right. So the main difference between this example and Tetris is just that rather than using the high score as the grading metric, you're using engagement. Basically, how many clicks did this get? How much attention did this get?
So how does that affect what I see in my newsfeed?
So let's say you have 100 news articles out there, right? And 99 of them are normal, boring, everyday news articles, but one of them is just slightly more extreme. Due to human nature, we tend to engage with that slightly more, right? We might pause on it for a couple of seconds. We might be slightly more inclined to click on it. But slightly more engagement means that it creates this feedback process where, especially in these smaller, more self-enclosed systems, what ends up happening is pretty rapidly the majority of the content ends up becoming extreme content.
So let's put this into real terms here. Suppose I vote for Bernie Sanders and my media choices tend to be on the left. How is what you just described play any role in what I actually physically see?
It is basically deciding what is the most engaging stuff and generally showing the most engaging stuff for you.
The most engaging stuff for me. And by most engaging, I mean, that automatically, by definition, that sort of puts it at the edge, a little bit further out than all the other things that might be presented to me. So,
Yeah.
and
And yeah, and remember, keep in mind that it's not that it's trying that it understands any of what it's doing. It's literally just based off of what people seem to like to click on more.
right, so it's just a process. I mean, the process itself is neither good nor evil, right or wrong. It's just basically a mathematical process,
Yeah.
effectively, right? So I'm not assigning, it does have an ethical consequence, but the process itself has no
Very
ethics
banal.
connected to it, right? It's just simply a process.
Right.
Yeah. So if I write an article,
Mhm.
Or let's say I'm in charge of someone's political campaign, right? And we put out some stuff, and it's just like what the candidate thinks, how they feel, kind of straightforward, nothing super controversial, just the policy. And we find that it doesn't get a lot of traction by comparison to this person's opponent who is like, out there with like crazy stuff. I mean, like really just stuff that you're going, what really is this for real now? Or is it people are taking it to be real? Oh, am I not going to be forced if I'm the person running the campaign to get out of that sort of regular box and get into the box that's more exciting?
I actually think that's a little bit backwards as a way of thinking about it. I would actually say that, yes, there are actors that take advantage of the system, but that the system itself is actually the one that is creating those people.
In what way? How to describe that?
So, what we talked about a little bit in terms of the acceleration of extreme content, like this will do two things, right? First, it'll normalize that extreme content because you're used to seeing it all the time now. And two, it means that slightly more extreme content than that will end up getting promoted, right? Or slightly more engaging content. And this is a feedback process, right? But what it was also really good at is creating divisiveness. So let's say you have a very simple example of like some guy steals a goat from a neighboring village, right? Maybe it's a prank, maybe it's
Borat movie.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But what the systems are very good at doing is creating this sort of like tit for tat back and forth that takes the original situation completely out of proportion. And what I'm saying actually is that it's almost a death by a thousand cuts, where we are being reprogrammed. And again, generally not intentionally, but we're being reprogrammed on how we instinctively react to certain stimuli by exposure to all sorts of different types of media. Because these neural networks, while they are much simpler than us, they're not anywhere near where our complexity of a human brain. They are potentially more complex than us when we're sort of like absent-mindedly browsing Facebook and just taking a look at a certain thing and reacting to it.
Let's shift gears a little bit, right? Let's talk about the election. How, if you were a politician or running a politician's campaign, how would you take advantage of what you just described?
Well, I could definitely take advantage of it by creating a content that is more extreme, more engaging, and keep in mind that the sharing of information is not necessarily something that is dependent on any sort of validation, any sort of truth.
So, in other words, if I, let's say, are producing a lot of media and I see that the past week certain types of media got more traction than other types, then I'm going to try to produce more media that roughly reflects the thing that got more traction last time. Right? Is that what you're saying? And then that type.
And yeah, and a lot of it, as well as how it's being shared, is plugged directly into these outlets. So you can get very rapid feedback.
Wow. So, what if I'm a bad actor? What if I'm a bad actor with ill intention?
My main thought process actually is that, first of all, there's always those bad actors out there. The main difference is that the systems that we've created will just naturally amplify those voices while drowning out the people who have a little bit less exciting content. This is oftentimes done in like advertising, for example, where you are being deliberately shown something that is intended to make you want something. And the thing is that at least in advertising, things tend to take a little bit longer because people have to create marketing campaigns and have to like a human has to actually decide.
We were saying before that the conjoining of algorithms, AI, and social media are causing people to be presented with ever more edgy content, and
Mhm.
that this dynamic occurs despite truth. So, aside from disengaging from social media, what else might I do to have a positive effect on what we're talking about?
The problem is that the change needs to happen either at the level with the decision-making process of the tech companies themselves or at the policy-making level. And I would say that we're not at the stage where we seem to be willing to move forward with that.
In
Um,
terms of policy making, though, that you're talking about the government instituting policy, right? So that is something that the public can have an effect on, in the
Right.
sense that I vote for a politician.
Mhm.
The politician presents a platform. Well, if I feel that what we're talking about is a very important issue, offer my
Mhm.
vote elsewhere, right? So maybe there is some effect we can have.
There definitely can be community organizing around how we treat data, how we utilize information. I would say that this is a quantum shift in how it affects society. It used to be that you would put up a propaganda poster and everyone would see the same poster, right? Now you're being shown just the right content to move you up one notch in terms of whatever metric you're looking at. And this is something that needs to be handled at a policy level, but as of right now, has not been.
Andy, I want to thank you very much for joining me this evening. It has been beyond interesting, eye-opening. I encourage all of my listeners out there, if you've learned nothing else from this interview, you should trust no single source of information, right? When you pick up an article anywhere from social media, check it with other sources elsewhere. Don't just accept at face value what social media is presenting you through its use of algorithms. All right, folks, have a great night. We're going to talk to you real soon. Andy, thanks again for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, this is Phil of the Phil Rosenberg Show, and I'm here to ask you to do me a small favor. Just take your finger, reach out, click the button that says subscribe. Just take your finger, reach out, and click the button that says subscribe. I need a bunch of subscribers. The more subscribers I have, something good happens. I don't even know what that is. They tell me I got to have more subscribers. I believe them. So please do that for me. I'd appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the show.